tile split open during third period chemistry, and everything I thought I knew about Ridgecrest High School died in that sound. I was sitting in the back row, half listening to Mr. Adler drone about covalent bonds, when the floor beneath Jenna Marsh's desk just dropped. Not a crack, not a settling groan. The linoleum buckled inward like something had punched it from below, and a fissure raced from one wall to the other in under 2 seconds. Jenna screamed and threw herself sideways. Her stool clattered into the aisle. Dust erupted from the gap, thick, yellowish, smelling like something between wet clay and old copper. Mr. Adler told everyone to stay calm, which is what teachers say right before they stop being calm themselves. He walked toward the crack with his hands out, palms down, like he was approaching a wounded dog. The floor sagged another inch under his weight. He stepped back. "Everyone out. Now, use the east corridor." We filed out like it was a fire drill, but nobody was joking. Nobody pulled out their phone. There was something about the smell, that coppery sweetness, that made everyone move fast and quiet. My name is Caleb Morrow. I was 17, 3 months from graduation, and the only reason I didn't leave the building with everyone else is because my best friend, Diego Reyes, grabbed my sleeve and pulled me into the stairwell. "Did you see it?" he whispered. "The crack?" "Yeah, I was sitting right..." No, below it. When the tile broke, I saw something below. Not pipes, not dirt. There were walls down there, Caleb. Carved walls. Diego had always been the kind of person who saw things others missed. Not in a paranoid way, in an observant way. He could spot a typo on a billboard from 40 yards. He once found a colonial-era coin in his backyard just by noticing the way the soil was discolored. So when he said he saw carved walls beneath the chemistry lab, I believed him. But I also wanted to leave. "They'll send someone to check it out," I said. "Structural engineers or whatever. They'll seal it. They'll pour concrete and forget about it. That's what they did with the East Wing flooding last year." He was right about that. Ridgecrest had a habit of patching over problems instead of solving them. The school was old. Built in 1943 as a wartime processing facility before it was converted. Everyone knew the history, vaguely. Nobody cared. Diego cared. He was already moving down the stairwell, toward the basement level where the janitors kept their supplies. I followed him because I'd been following him into bad ideas since we were 12, and because something in my chest was pulling me toward that smell, that impossible gap in the floor. Curiosity is a parasite. It doesn't care about your survival. The basement was unlocked. Miguel, the head custodian, had left for the day before the crack happened. His coffee was still warm on the desk by the utility closet. Diego moved through the space like he'd memorized the layout, which he probably had. He'd been down here twice for detention cleanup duty. We found the access point behind a row of industrial shelving units. Not a door, a hole. Roughly circular, about 4 feet across, punched through the concrete foundation into darkness below. The edges were ragged but old, like something had broken through a long time ago, and the concrete had been crumbling inward for years. Someone had placed the shelving in front of it deliberately. "This isn't new," Diego said, kneeling at the edge. He pulled out his phone and aimed the flashlight down. The beam hit carved stone steps, not poured concrete, not utility infrastructure. Cut stone, evenly spaced, descending into a tunnel that curved out of sight. The air rising from below was warm and tasted like minerals and age. "That's not a sewer," I said. "No," Diego agreed. "That's not a sewer." He looked at me, and I saw the exact expression that had preceded every terrible decision in our friendship. Wide eyes, tight jaw, absolute certainty that we were going down there. Behind us, upstairs, We could hear the muffled intercom announcing a full building evacuation. We went down. The steps were worn smooth in the center, polished by what must have been thousands of footsteps over an impossible span of time. Diego went first, phone raised, the light carving a narrow corridor of visibility through the black. I kept one hand on the stone wall. It was warm, not hot, but warmer than it should have been, 50 feet below a public school in northern Ohio. The staircase spiraled, not tightly, like a lighthouse tower, but in a wide, gradual descent that made me lose track of how far we'd gone. After what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably 2, the steps flattened into a landing. The tunnel branched. Left or right? Diego asked. Up, I said. He ignored me and went left. The tunnel widened, the ceiling rose, and then the walls changed. They'd been rough-cut stone for the first section, functional and undecorated. But here, someone had carved into them. Not graffiti, not initials. Symbols, geometric patterns interlocking in sequences that repeated and evolved along the length of the corridor. Between the symbols, there were recesses carved into the walls at regular intervals, each about the size of a shoebox. Most were empty. A few contained objects I couldn't identify in the phone light. Dark shapes, possibly ceramic, possibly organic. This is pre-colonial, Diego whispered. Maybe older. You don't know that. Look at the tool marks. There's no machine scoring. This was done by hand. He wasn't wrong. The carvings had an irregularity to them that felt intentional. Each symbol slightly different from the last, like handwriting. I ran my fingers over one. The stone was dry and faintly gritty, like chalk. We walked for another 100 yards. The tunnel opened into a chamber. I need to describe this carefully, because what we found down there became the reason 43 people died over the next 6 days. And I've spent every night since trying to understand whether we caused it or just uncovered what was already inevitable. The chamber was vast. Diego's phone light couldn't reach the ceiling or the far wall. But what it did illuminate was enough to stop both of us mid-step. There were structures, not formations, structures, built things. Low walls of stacked stone dividing the space into sections. Raised platforms, what appeared to be stone basins, cracked and dry. The layout was deliberate, organized, repeating. It's a city, Diego said. He was exaggerating, but not by much. It was a settlement, at minimum. A designed underground space with zones and pathways and infrastructure that implied sustained habitation by people. Underground, beneath a building that had existed since World War II, which meant this had been buried beneath it the entire time, or had existed long before the school was built on top of it. We need to document this, Diego said, already photographing everything. This is a legitimate archaeological discovery. This could rewrite the history of this entire region. I wasn't listening to him. I was listening to something else. A sound, faint, rhythmic, coming from deeper in the chamber, beyond the reach of our light. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't water. It had a biological quality, a wet, repeating pulse, like breathing through a restricted airway. Diego, stop! He lowered his phone. In the sudden relative silence, he heard it too. What is that? He asked. We're leaving, right now. It's probably an air current through a narrow passage. Venturi effect. That's not wind. The sound changed. It didn't get louder. It multiplied. Where there had been one source, there were now 2. Then 3. Staggered, overlapping, each slightly different in pitch and rhythm, like a room full of sleepers waking up, one by one. Diego took a step backward, His heel hit one of the low stone walls and he stumbled, catching himself with his free hand. The phone light swung wildly across the chamber, and in that chaotic sweep of illumination, I saw something move. Not close. Maybe 60 or 70 feet away, between two of the raised platforms. A shape, upright, human-sized, motionless by the time the light passed over it again. But it hadn't been there before. "Run," I said. We ran. We hit the staircase at full sprint, taking the steps two at a time, palms slapping the curved walls for balance. Diego was faster, but I was taller, and we reached the basement almost simultaneously, tumbling through the hole in the foundation and scattering the shelving units as we scrambled past. I shoved the largest shelf back over the opening. It was inadequate, a metal rack against whatever was down there, but the instinct to barricade was older than logic. Diego helped me drag a second unit across. We stacked boxes of industrial cleaner on top. "What did you see?" he gasped. "A person, standing." "Down there? That's impossible." "I know what I saw." "Then someone else knows about the tunnels. An urban explorer, a homeless person." "Diego." It didn't move right. He stared at me. We were both breathing hard, hands shaking. The overhead fluorescent hummed its indifferent drone. From beyond the shelving, from below, there was only silence. "What do you mean it didn't move right?" he asked quietly. I tried to articulate what I'd seen in that half-second of swinging light. The figure had been standing, but its posture was wrong. Shoulders rotated forward, arms hanging at an angle that suggested the joints had been reorganized. And the skin, in the brief flash, had looked gray. Not shadowed. Gray, like something that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. "We tell someone," I said. "Right now." We went upstairs. The school was empty. Everyone had been evacuated to the football field. We found Vice Principal Shonda Hayes coordinating with two firefighters near the main entrance. I told her about the tunnels. I told her about the chamber. I left out the figure because I wasn't sure yet, and because saying, "I saw something standing in the dark underground," would have gotten us dismissed as panicked teenagers. Mrs. Hayes listened with the particular patience of someone who had dealt with 17 years of adolescent exaggeration. She thanked us. She told us to join the evacuation. She said the structural assessment team would handle everything. Diego and I walked to the field. Around us, 1,400 students milled in clusters, some anxious, most treating it as a welcome break from routine. I found my younger sister Priya sitting with her freshman friends near the bleachers. She was fine, bored actually. She asked me why I looked pale. "The floor broke in Adler's room," I said. "Yeah, everyone knows. Jenna posted it already." I looked at my phone. Jenna's video had 40,000 views in 20 minutes. You could see the crack, the dust, the eruption. You could hear the sound. That wet, compressed crack of the tile giving way. The comments were mostly jokes. Foundation issues trending more than the lesson plan. Nobody suspected what was underneath. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed in my room on Elkhorn Drive, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of that figure standing between the stone platforms. I told myself it was a shadow. A trick of the swinging light, a coat on a rock formation that my panicked brain had assembled into a human shape. But the breathing, the multiplying, rhythmic, wet breathing, that wasn't a shadow. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Diego. "Check the news." I opened my browser. The local station had a brief report. Structural sinkhole at Ridgecrest High. School closed pending assessment. Standard coverage. But beneath it, a second story caught my eye. A jogger on the Ridgecrest Nature Trail, which ran along the eastern property line of the school, had been attacked by an unidentified individual at approximately 11:30 p.m. The jogger, a 28-year-old nurse named April Sandoval, was in critical condition at St. Elias Hospital. The attacker had not been apprehended. Witnesses described the assailant as disoriented and physically unusual. I read the article 3 times. Then I called Diego. "They're coming up," I said. "You don't know that." Disoriented, physically unusual. That's what I saw. Silence on the line. Then, "What do we do?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. But I felt, in the marrow of my bones, that the crack in the chemistry lab floor had opened something that wasn't going to close on its own. And the thing in the dark, the things, were no longer content to stay below. School stayed closed on Tuesday. The district cited structural concerns, pending inspection. My mother, Dr. Lena Morrow, a pediatrician at the county clinic, told Priya and me over breakfast that she'd heard the sinkhole was deeper than expected. "Might be closed all week," she said, and Priya pumped her fist like she'd won a prize. I picked up my eggs and watched the morning news on the kitchen TV. April Sandoval's attack had been upgraded from assault to something vaguer. Incident under investigation. The reporter mentioned that Sandoval had been placed in isolation at St. Elias due to an unidentified secondary condition. No further details. Diego picked me up at 10. He drove a rust-colored Civic that smelled like pine air freshener and anxiety. He'd been researching all night. "The school was built on a government parcel in 1943, he said, pulling up documents on his phone while idling in my driveway. Before that, the land was federally owned. Before that, nothing, no records. The county archives have a gap between 1887 and 1941. 54 years of nothing. That's an archival gap. It doesn't mean... It means someone erased the record. That land had a history, and someone decided it shouldn't be accessible. He'd also found something else. A 1952 memo from the Army Corps of Engineers, partially declassified, referencing subsurface anomalies on the Ridgecrest parcel. The memo recommended permanent sealing of all access points and reclassification of site status. The attached assessment was redacted entirely. They knew, Diego said. They built a school on top of it and sealed it. We drove to the school. The parking lot was empty except for 2 county vehicles and a chain-link fence section blocking the main entrance. No guards, no police tape. Whatever urgency had prompted the evacuation had apparently faded into bureaucratic inertia. We parked on the street and walked the perimeter. The nature trail ran along the east side, cutting through a thin strip of oak and maple before reaching the school's athletic fields. We found the spot where Sandoval had been attacked. There was still a small evidence marker stuck in the dirt beside the trail, and a brownish stain on the gravel that could have been blood or could have been nothing. What caught my attention was the ground nearby. A patch of earth, roughly 3 feet across, had been disturbed. Not dug, pushed upward from below, like something had emerged from the soil. The dirt was mounded in a ring, and at the center was a hole just wide enough for a human body to pass through. "That's a new exit point," Diego said. We didn't go near it. We photographed it from 10 feet away and left. Back in the car, I called the non-emergency police line and reported the hole. The dispatcher took my information with the enthusiasm of someone filling out their 40th form of the morning. She said she'd relay it to the investigating officer. At noon, I got a text from Tomas Vega, a senior who worked part-time as an orderly at St. Elias. Tomas was in my AP history class and owed me for lending him my notes before the midterm. His message was short. "Sandoval bit a nurse this morning. They've locked down the ICU wing. Something is really wrong with her. Her skin is turning gray. Gray. I showed Diego. He pulled over and read it twice. "We need to go to the hospital," he said. "And do what? We're 17. They won't let us into a lockdown ICU. Tomas can get us in." Tomas is an orderly, not a security consultant. But Diego was already texting him. The reply came fast. Tomas could meet us at the service entrance at 3, when the shift change created a 15-minute window of reduced oversight. I should have said no. I should have called my mother. I should have taken the information we had and handed it to someone with authority and resources and the capacity to act on it. But I was 17, and the thing in the dark had shown me its face, and I needed to understand what it was before it surfaced again. We drove to St. Elias. Tomas met us at the loading dock behind the hospital's east wing. He was a stocky kid with a shaved head and steady hands, the kind of person who stayed calm in a crisis, not because he was brave, but because panic simply didn't occur to him. He was wearing his blue orderly scrubs and a lanyard that read, "Vega T. Support staff. I can get you to the observation window," he said. "That's it. You look through the glass, you see what I've been seeing, and then you leave. Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anything." We followed him through a service corridor that smelled like bleach and heated plastic. The hospital was functioning normally on the surface. Nurses at stations, monitors beeping their reliable rhythms, a custodian mopping tile near the elevator bank. But the ICU corridor was different. Someone had placed an additional barrier across it. Not a proper quarantine seal, just a rolling partition and a handwritten sign that read, "Restricted access. Authorized personnel only." Tomas walked past it without hesitation. We followed. The observation window overlooked a single patient room. April Sandoval was inside, restrained at the wrists and ankles, lying on a hospital bed with the rails raised. 2 IV lines ran into her arms. A ventilator mask covered her nose and mouth. Monitors tracked vitals that I couldn't interpret but that seemed, even to my untrained eye, erratic. But the vitals weren't what made my stomach drop. Her skin had changed. Not just in color, in texture. It had taken on a matte, almost calcium-like quality, as if the moisture had been drawn out of the dermal layers and replaced with calcium-like quality. As if the moisture had been drawn out of the dermal layers and replaced with something calcium-like quality. Gray, like I'd seen in the tunnel. Like stone that had learned to breathe. Her eyes were open. They tracked movement on the other side of the glass. When she saw us, her gaze locked onto my face and didn't waver. The ventilator mask fogged and cleared, in a rhythm that was too fast to be restful. "She's been like this since 5 a.m., Tomas said quietly. "Before that, she was unconscious. Then she just woke up, all at once. And she bit Dr. Keene on the forearm when he tried to adjust her restraints." "Where's Dr. Keene?" Diego asked. "Isolation room 2, down the hall. Same symptoms starting, gray patches on his hands where she bit him. The transmission vector was the bite. I knew it then, standing at that window, watching April Sandoval watch me with eyes that saw everything and understood nothing I could recognize. Whatever had been living beneath Ridgecrest, whatever had stood in that dark chamber, breathing in unison, it spread through contact, through saliva, through broken skin, through the most ancient and intimate form of violence one body could inflict on another. "Has anyone reported this to the CDC?" I asked. Tomas shrugged. "Above my pay grade. I heard the chief of medicine talking to someone on the phone this morning. She used the word atypical. That's hospital code for we have no idea what's happening." We left the way we came. In the car, none of us spoke for a long time. Diego drove aimlessly through the residential streets north of downtown, past the gas stations and strip malls and neat rows of houses where 1,400 Ridgecrest students were spending their unexpected day off playing games, watching shows, living in the last hours of a world they still trusted. "We have to go public," Diego said finally. "Post what we know. The tunnels, the chamber, the hole on the trail, Sandoval's condition. Put it online and let people decide for themselves." "Nobody will believe us," I said. "Two high school kids claiming there's an underground city full of gray people beneath the school? We'll be memes by Thursday." Then what? I looked out the window. A woman was walking her dog on Maple Avenue. A child was riding a bicycle in circles in a driveway. The sun was setting in a way that made everything look like a photograph someone would miss later. "We go back down," I said, "and we bring proof." I needed a team, not a large one. Large groups attract attention and dissolve into argument. I needed people who were useful, trustworthy, and willing to enter a dark hole beneath a condemned school, based on the testimony of two teenagers who'd seen a shadow. Diego was already in. Tomas agreed after I showed him the photos of the tunnel carvings and the emergence hole on the nature trail. His medical knowledge, even the limited, practical kind an orderly accumulates, made him essential. The fourth member was someone I hadn't expected, my sister's friend, Naomi Chen. Naomi was a junior, 16, president of the school's geology club, and she'd overheard Priya telling her about the sinkhole over FaceTime. She texted me directly. "I've been studying the Ridgecrest geological surveys for a class project. The substrate beneath the school is karst limestone. Karst forms caves naturally. If there's a settlement down there, it's because someone found a natural cave system and expanded it. I can help you navigate it." I didn't want a 16-year-old in a potentially dangerous underground space. I told her so. She responded with a detailed topographical map she'd generated from public survey data, showing 3 probable cave entrances within a half-mile radius of the school, 2 of which aligned with the locations of the floor crack and the trail emergence hole. I said yes. The 5th was the one I hesitated over longest. Marcus Bell, senior, varsity wrestler, 2 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier than me, with the quiet disposition of someone who had learned early that size draws attention, so personality shouldn't. Marcus and I had been close once. Freshman year, before his father's death had pulled him into a withdrawn orbit I couldn't reach. We still nodded in the hallways. We still sat near each other at assemblies. But the friendship had calcified into something formal and distant. I called him because I trusted him, and because if something in that tunnel decided to charge at us, I wanted Marcus between it and me. He listened. He asked 3 questions. How deep, how dark, and how certain was I that there was something alive down there? "Certain," I said. "Pick me up at 6 tomorrow morning. Wednesday." We gathered at Diego's house before dawn. Naomi had printed her maps. Tomas had brought a first aid kit from the hospital, not a consumer one, a proper trauma kit with hemostatic gauze, an emergency tourniquet, and a bottle of broad-spectrum antiseptic. Diego had flashlights, batteries, rope, and a climbing harness he'd borrowed from his uncle's garage. Marcus brought himself, which was enough. I brought a notebook, not for documentation, for orientation. I'd read once that people in cave systems lose directional sense within minutes. I planned to sketch our route as we went, marking every turn, every intersection, every landmark. We drove to the school in 2 cars. The chain-link barrier was still across the main entrance, but the basement service door on the north side was accessible through a gap in the construction fencing. Naomi noted that no one had posted a guard. "That's either negligent or deliberate," she said. Inside, the basement was unchanged. Miguel's coffee cup was still on the desk, now growing a thin film of mold. The shelving units Diego and I had pushed over the hole were still in place. We moved them. The hole breathed warm air at us, steady and mineral-rich. "I'll go first," Marcus said. Not a question. He lowered himself through the gap and dropped onto the stone steps below. His flashlight beam swept the tunnel and found nothing moving. One by one, we descended. Naomi last, pulling the shelving back into approximate position behind us, not to seal ourselves in, but to avoid drawing attention from anyone who might enter the basement while we were below. The tunnel swallowed us. The morning light from the basement disappeared within 3 turns of the spiral staircase. And then there was nothing but our flashlights and the sound of our breathing and the warm, ancient air that tasted like it had been sealed away from the sky for centuries. I marked the first turn in my notebook. We went deeper. The chamber hit us differently with 5 flashlights instead of 1. Where Diego and I had seen fragments, a wall here, a basin there, the combined beams revealed scope. The settlement extended at least 300 yards in every direction from the entrance point. The stone structures rose to varying heights, some barely knee-high boundary markers, others reaching 8 or 9 feet with intact doorways and internal divisions. The ceiling, when our lights finally found it, was natural cave rock, stalactites interrupted by carved support columns that someone had chiseled from the native limestone to reinforce the span. "This is inhabited," Naomi said, her voice tight with controlled awe. "Was inhabited. For a long time. Look at the wear patterns on the floor. You don't get that kind of erosion in less than 100 years of foot traffic." She was kneeling at the threshold of one of the larger structures, running her fingers along the stone. Diego photographed everything systematically, his phone clicking in steady rhythm. Marcus stood at the perimeter of our group, facing outward, watching the dark beyond our light. "The breathing," I said. "Diego and I heard breathing last time, coming from deeper in." "I don't hear anything now," Tomas said. He was right. The chamber was silent, except for us. No wet rhythm, no multiplying pulse. Just dead air and old stone. We moved inward, staying close. Naomi navigated using her map and a compass, noting our position relative to the entrance. The settlement was organized in concentric rings around a central open space, a plaza or gathering area, roughly circular, paved with fitted stone slabs. At its center stood a raised platform, chest high, with channels carved into its surface that ran to the edges and down the sides. "Drainage channels," Naomi said. "For what?" Marcus asked. Nobody answered. Beyond the plaza, the structures grew denser and more complex. Some had multiple rooms. Some had stone shelves built into the walls, holding objects, ceramic vessels, stone tools, bundles of materials so old they'd petrified into unidentifiable lumps. Tomas picked up one of the ceramic vessels and turned it in his flashlight beam. It was small, round, sealed with a cap of hardened resin. "Don't open that," I said. "Wasn't going to." He set it back exactly where he'd found it. We'd been underground for 40 minutes when Diego called out from a passage on the far side of the settlement. He'd found a corridor leading deeper, narrower than the entrance tunnel with a lower ceiling. And on the walls of this corridor, the carvings changed. The geometric symbols from the entrance were absent here. In their place were images, pictographs, rendered in a style that was neither primitive nor sophisticated, just direct. Figures, human figures, standing in rows, and among them, other figures that were almost human but subtly wrong. Their limbs were elongated. Their postures were curved. Their mouths were open. "Those aren't the same as the others," Naomi said, studying the carvings. The regular human figures are depicted upright, active, building, carrying, gathering. These others are always static, standing, mouths open, and they're always in the lower sections of the composition. Below ground, Diego said. The artists are showing them underground, or showing that they came from underground. Marcus moved to the front of the group. There's something else, he said. He was pointing his flashlight further down the corridor. The beam revealed another chamber beyond, smaller than the settlement, more enclosed. And in this chamber, the floor was different. It was covered with depressions, evenly spaced, each roughly the size and shape of a human body lying flat. There were dozens of them, maybe 100. Burial chamber, Tomas said. They're empty, Marcus said. He was right. Every depression was vacant. Whatever, whoever, had lain in them was gone. The stone was stained at the bottom of each cavity, darkened by contact with something organic over a very long period. But the bodies themselves had been removed, or had removed themselves. The silence in that room had a different quality than the silence in the settlement. It was expectant, held. I opened my notebook and began to sketch the layout. My hand was shaking. Naomi crouched at the edge of one of the depressions and scraped a sample of the dark residue into a plastic bag from her kit. Her movements were precise, academic, unbothered. The motions of someone so absorbed in discovery that fear hadn't fully registered yet. The staining is consistent with long-term organic decomposition, she said. But the depressions themselves are carved. This isn't natural erosion. Someone made these to hold bodies. And then the bodies left, Diego said. Bodies don't leave. These did. I counted the depressions. 96. Arranged in 8 rows of 12, perfectly aligned, each separated by exactly the same distance. The precision was unsettling, not the organic layout of a communal burial ground, but something more regimented, more intentional, as if whoever placed the bodies here expected them to need organization, expected to track them, expected them to wake up. We've seen enough, I said. We have photos, samples, documentation. We go up, we compile everything, and we take it to someone who can act on it. Agreed, Marcus said. He'd been standing at the chamber's only exit, the corridor leading back to the main settlement, and his posture had shifted. He was no longer casually watchful. He was braced. We moved back through the corridor, past the pictographs, into the open expanse of the settlement. Our flashlights made the stone structures cast long, rotating shadows as we walked. And every shadow looked like something standing. Tomas noticed it first. He stopped mid-stride and held up a fist, a military gesture he'd picked up from his older brother. We all froze. The ceramic vessel, he whispered, the one I picked up and put back. What about it? It's not there. He was shining his light into the structure where he'd handled the sealed vessel. The stone shelf was bare. Not just the vessel, several objects had been removed from the surrounding shelves as well. The dust patterns showed circular outlines where things had sat for decades or centuries. Now the shelves were partially empty. Someone had been here while we were in the burial chamber. Someone had moved through the settlement silently, within 50 yards of us, and taken objects from the shelves. The 5 of us drew together instinctively, back to back, lights pointing outward. The settlement stretched in every direction, its stone walls creating a labyrinth of blind corners and hidden recesses. Anything could be standing just beyond our light, and we would never know until we turned and caught it in the beam. Move, Marcus said. Straight back to the entrance. Nobody stops. We walked fast. Not running, running in the dark over uneven stone. Invites broken ankles. But fast, deliberate, light sweeping, eyes wide. The central plaza passed beneath us. The drainage channel raised platform gleamed wetly in the flashlight. And I realized, with a sick lurch, that they hadn't been wet before. Something had been poured over the platform while we'd been deeper in. "Don't look at it," Diego said, pulling my arm. "Keep moving." The entrance tunnel appeared ahead. We funneled into it, single file, Marcus in front, me in the rear. The spiral staircase was exactly where we'd left it. We climbed. Halfway up, Naomi grabbed my wrist. "Listen," she breathed. Below us, rising from the tunnel we just exited, came the sound. The breathing, wet, rhythmic, overlapping. Not one source, not three. A chorus, a congregation of restricted airways pulling air through passages that no longer functioned correctly. It was louder than before, closer, and then a new sound joined it. Footsteps on stone. Many footsteps, moving in the same direction we were moving. Following. "Go," I said, and all pretense of careful footing evaporated. We scrambled up the remaining stairs, hauled ourselves through the foundation hole, crashed through the shelving, and didn't stop until we were outside the building, standing in the gray morning light, gasping. Marcus shoved the service door shut and braced a dumpster against it. It wasn't enough. We all knew it wasn't enough. Whatever was down there had already found other exits, had already reached the surface once. The school's basement door was one threshold among many. But the light helped. For the moment, the light helped. We drove to Diego's house and locked every door. His parents were both at work. His father at the Ridgecrest post office, his mother at the elementary school across town. We spread our evidence across the kitchen table. Photos, Naomi's soil samples, my hand-drawn map, Diego's video clips, Tomas's first-hand account of Sandoval's condition. It was damning. It was also, viewed from outside, completely insane. "If we post this publicly, we get buried in mockery," Diego said. "If we take it to the police, we get dismissed. If we take it to the school board, they refer us to counseling." "Tomas, what's happening at the hospital?" I asked. He checked his phone. 3 new messages from coworkers. His face changed as he read them. Dr. Keene attacked a nurse at 4 a.m., same as Sandoval. Sudden aggression, gray discoloration, loss of coherent speech. They've locked down the entire 3rd floor. And there's a 3rd case now, a paramedic who transported Sandoval on the first night. He reported to the ER with a bite wound he'd initially concealed. He turned within 8 hours. 3 cases, exponential potential. Every person bitten becomes a vector. Every vector bites more. Naomi had her laptop open. She'd been quiet since we returned, processing what we'd seen with the analytical distance of someone who trusted data more than emotion. Now she turned the screen toward us. "I've been cross-referencing the site characteristics with documented subterranean settlements. The architecture, the burial configuration, the pictographs. They're consistent with a pattern I've only seen referenced in one place." She'd found an obscure archaeological journal article from 1971, written by a researcher named Dr. Helen Voss at the University of Michigan. Voss had documented 3 sites in the Ohio River Valley where indigenous peoples had carved underground settlements, not for habitation, but for containment. The sites were described as repositories, places where individuals afflicted with an unspecified condition were taken below ground and sealed in. The condition was described in the few surviving oral histories as the stone sleep. Afflicted individuals became unresponsive, their skin hardening, their vital signs dropping to near undetectable levels. But they didn't die. They entered a state of suspended animation that could last, according to the oral tradition, indefinitely. The communities above built settlements around the sleepers, maintained them, guarded the entrances, not to protect the sleepers, to protect everyone else from what the sleepers became when they woke. The article says Voss tried to get federal funding to excavate one of the sites. Naomi continued. She was denied. Her research was discredited. She lost her position. The sites were paved over or developed. One of them was Ridgecrest, I said. Naomi nodded. The coordinates match. So the government had known. Not about the specifics, maybe, but about the anomaly. The 1952 Army Corps memo, the sealed access points, the 54-year gap in the county archives. They'd found the sleepers, realized they couldn't explain them, and buried the evidence under a school. And now the school's foundation had cracked, the air had changed, and the sleepers were waking. How many depressions in the burial chamber? Marcus asked. 96, I said. And how many were empty? All of them. The room absorbed that number. 96 bodies, risen from stone cradles where they'd lain for centuries, now moving through a cave system with multiple surface exits in a town of 12,000 people. We need to warn people, Tomas said. Warn them of what? Diego shot back. A zombie outbreak from an ancient underground city? We sound unhinged. People are going to die. People are already dying. Sandoval, Keene, the paramedic. I stood up. The arguing was consuming time we didn't have. We split up. Tomas goes back to the hospital and documents everything he can. Video, records, whatever he can access. Naomi takes the geological data to Dr. Warren at the community college. She teaches earth science, and she'll take this seriously. Diego and I go to the police station with the photos and the map. Marcus. I'll go to the school, Marcus said. Someone needs to make sure that basement door is sealed properly. We agreed. We synchronized our phones. We set a rendezvous for 6 p.m. at Diego's house. It was the last time all 5 of us were in the same room. The police didn't listen. Officer Darlene Huang at the Ridgecrest precinct was polite, thorough in her note-taking, and completely unequipped to process what we were telling her. She looked at our photos with interest. The tunnels were genuinely striking. But when we connected them to the hospital cases, her expression shifted into the careful neutrality of someone managing a situation rather than investigating one. We'll send this to the county inspector's office, she said. If there's a structural hazard beneath the school, they'll address it. It's not a structural hazard, Diego said. It's a... I put my hand on his arm. Pushing harder would get us flagged as unstable. We thanked her and left. In the car, Diego's phone rang. It was Naomi. She was speaking fast, her voice stripped of its usual composure. Dr. Warren wasn't at the college, but I found Professor Langston in the history department and showed him Voss's article and our photos. Caleb, he recognized the site. He said the college received a grant in 2004 to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys of the Ridgecrest parcel. They found the cavities. The whole underground network showed up on the scans. The report was submitted to the State Geological Survey. And it was classified. Langston was told to delete his copies. He didn't. He has the radar images. Caleb, the cave system extends for miles. It's not just under the school. It runs beneath half the town. The ground beneath Ridgecrest was hollow. The city, whatever we were calling it, the settlement, the repository, was far larger than the section we'd explored. Tunnels and chambers branched beneath residential neighborhoods, beneath the commercial district, beneath the hospital where 3 infected patients were currently restrained. Get the radar images from Langston, I said. Scan them and send them to all of us. Then go home and stay inside. Already done. He's emailing them now. But Caleb, there's something else. The radar showed the cavities in 2004, and the report notes that several of them were directly beneath buildings with basements, including the hospital. St. Elias sat on the same geological formation. If the cave system ran beneath it, and if the sleepers had access to the tunnels, then the hospital's basement was another potential emergence point. And the hospital was full of vulnerable people. I called Thomas, no answer. Called again, voicemail. Diego accelerated. We crossed town in 11 minutes and pulled into the St. Elias parking lot at 3:47 p.m. The exterior was calm. No ambulances with lights running, no visible commotion. We entered through the main lobby. The reception desk was staffed. Visitors moved through the corridors. Everything appeared normal, except the third floor. When we took the elevator up, the doors opened onto an empty hallway. The rolling partition was still in place, but the handwritten sign had been replaced by a printed one. Floor closed. No admittance. Beyond the barrier, the lights were on, but the corridor was deserted. "Tomas?" I called. My voice bounced off tile and glass and returned unanswered. Diego tried the door to the stairwell. Locked. I badged the elevator for the 4th floor and we rode up, then took the interior stairs back down to 3. The stairwell door on 3 was also locked, but through the narrow window, I could see the ICU corridor. It was empty. The doors to the patient rooms were open. The monitoring stations were dark. A wheelchair lay on its side near the nurse's station, and a scatter of papers fanned across the floor as if dropped in haste. Then I saw the blood. A handprint on the wall near room 308, vivid red against institutional white. Below it, a drag mark on the linoleum, leading toward the far end of the corridor and around a corner. "Tomas was here," Diego said. His voice was barely audible. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "The basement door at the school is open. The shelving is destroyed. There are tracks in the dust leading up, dozens of tracks. I'm coming to find you. Where are you?" I texted back our location. Then I stared through the window at the empty, bloodied corridor and understood that the situation had passed beyond documentation, beyond persuasion, beyond the capacity of 2 teenagers to manage. The sleepers were awake. They were spreading. And we were already too late to stop the first wave. Marcus arrived at Street. Elias 20 minutes later. He'd driven with the kind of focused aggression that ignored speed limits and stop signs. And he walked into the lobby with a crowbar in his hand that he'd taken from the school's custodial closet. Nobody stopped him. The lobby had begun to empty. Visitors leaving with hurried steps. A security guard speaking urgently into his radio by the gift shop. "Something happened on 3, I told him. "The floor's been evacuated. There's blood." "Where's Thomas?" "I don't know." Marcus looked at the crowbar in his hand, then at the elevator. He made a decision with the economy of motion I'd always envied in him. No deliberation, no weighing of options, just action. He walked to the fire stairs and used the crowbar to pry the 3rd floor door. It took him 8 seconds. The corridor smelled wrong. Not like the tunnels, not mineral and warm. This was sharper, biological. The overhead fluorescents were still on, casting their reliable blue-white light over a scene that didn't belong in it. The blood trail led from room 308, around the corner, to a utility area at the back of the floor. The door to the utility room was ajar. Inside, we found Tomas. He was alive. Crouched behind a medical supply rack, holding a fire extinguisher like a weapon. His scrubs were torn at the shoulder. There was a scratch across his left cheek. Superficial, already clotting. When he saw us, the tension in his body released so completely that he nearly collapsed. "They came through the floor," he said. "The basement. Through the basement. The tile in the supply room on one cracked and they came up. 5 of them. Maybe 6. Gray, Caleb, like Sandoval but worse. They've been in the ground longer. Their joints move wrong. They grabbed Dr. Keene's nurse, the one Sandoval bit this morning, and she was already changing. She went with them. She walked with them." "Walked where?" "Back down. They pulled up floor tiles and went back into the tunnels. Took Sandoval, too. She broke her own restraints. I watched her snap leather straps like thread." "And the paramedic? The 3rd case?" Tomas's expression fractured. "He didn't go with them. He went out, through the corridor, down the stairs, into the hospital. Caleb, he was biting people in the lobby before security could react. I saw him take down a woman near the elevator. There's at least 4 new exposures on the 1st floor right now. The math was collapsing. 3 cases this morning. Now a lobby attack, multiple new exposures, each one an 8-hour countdown to another vector, in a hospital full of immobile, vulnerable patients. We need to get everyone out," Diego said. "The hospital is initiating evacuation," Tomas replied. "I heard the code on the intercom before the 3rd floor went dark. But they're treating it as a hazmat situation. They don't understand what's happening." Marcus was already moving back toward the stairwell. "We go floor by floor. We help who we can, and we get out." "Marcus, we're not equipped." "Nobody's equipped. That's the point." He was right, and I hated him for it. We descended to the 2nd floor. The scene there was chaotic but functional. Nurses were moving patients toward the stairwell, and 2 security officers were directing traffic with the practiced urgency of people trained for fire evacuations, applying their protocol to something they couldn't name. We helped. Diego pushed a wheelchair. Tomas guided an elderly man on a walker. I carried an IV stand alongside a patient who couldn't walk without it. Marcus cleared obstacles and held doors. On the 1st floor, the lobby had been abandoned. The security guard I'd seen earlier was on the ground near the reception desk, a bite wound on his forearm, his eyes open and unfocused. He was still breathing, but his skin had already begun to change. The gray crept outward from the wound like frost across a window pane. I knelt beside him. His name tag read, Paul Jeffers. He looked at me and his mouth opened, but what came out wasn't words. It was that sound, the wet, restricted breathing, amplified through a human throat. I stepped back. Diego pulled me toward the exit. We left Paul Jeffers on the floor. I think about him every night. Outside, the parking lot had become a staging area. 3 ambulances, 2 police cruisers, and a fire truck were arranged in a loose perimeter. Paramedics were triaging patients on the pavement. A crowd of displaced visitors and staff clustered near the parking garage. Somewhere, a child was crying. That thin, reedy wail that cuts through any amount of adult panic. We found each other in the chaos. Diego, Thomas, Marcus, and me, standing by the Civic, breathing hard, watching the hospital from a distance that felt like safety, but wasn't. My phone rang. Naomi. Caleb, I'm at Diego's house. Professor Langston just called me. He contacted a colleague at FEMA, someone he trusts. He told them everything. Tunnels, sleepers, hospital cases. The colleague said FEMA already knows. What? They've known since Tuesday. When the floor cracked at the school, the site was flagged in a federal database. There's been a monitoring protocol in place since the 1950s. Seismic sensors around the school perimeter. They detected movement underground 48 hours ago and activated a response team. Then where is the response team? That's the thing. The colleague said the protocol isn't rescue. It's containment. They're not coming to save Ridgecrest. They're coming to seal the exits and quarantine the area. The town is the containment zone. The information landed like a physical blow. The federal government had spent 70 years monitoring the site, maintaining the seal, waiting for exactly this scenario. And their plan wasn't evacuation. It was lockdown. Every person in Ridgecrest was an acceptable loss inside a perimeter designed to prevent the infection from reaching the wider population. How long? I asked. Langston's colleague said the team deploys within 72 hours of activation. The floor cracked Monday morning. It's Wednesday afternoon. So they're already here. Or they're close. Caleb, we need to get out of town. Now, before the perimeter closes. She was right. I knew she was right. But I looked at the hospital parking lot. The patients on stretchers, the nurses working triage, the crying child. And the calculus of self-preservation buckled under the weight of something I couldn't name. My mom is at the clinic, I said. Priya is at home. Get them. Get everyone you can. I'll have Diego's car packed and ready. We leave by 8. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the practiced calm of a doctor managing a crisis. Caleb, I know. We're hearing reports from St. Elias. The clinic is closing early. I'll be home by 6. Mom, you need to pack a bag. We're leaving town tonight. Leaving? Caleb, what are you talking about? I told her. All of it. The tunnels, the sleepers, the federal containment protocol. I told her about Sandoval's gray skin, about the empty burial depressions, about the sound of footsteps following us up the staircase. I told her everything I'd held back for 2 days because I'd been afraid she wouldn't believe me. She was quiet for a long time. Come home, she said. Bring your friends. We drove to Alcorn Drive. The streets were busier than usual for a Wednesday afternoon. Word of the hospital incident was spreading through the informal networks of a small town. Through texts and calls and neighbors talking across fences. I saw people loading cars, saw a family carrying suitcases down their front steps, saw a man boarding up his windows with plywood sheets. The town was beginning to understand. Not the full picture, not the tunnels, not the sleepers, not the containment protocol, but the animal part of their brains. The part that had kept their ancestors alive through every predator and plague was signaling. Something was wrong. Something was coming. Move. At home, Priya met us at the door. She was holding her phone, and on the screen was a video, shaky, shot from a car window, showing 3 figures walking down the middle of Birch Street in broad daylight. They moved with that wrongness I recognized. The rotated shoulders, the slack-armed gait, the heads tilted at angles that no intact cervical spine would permit. The comments beneath the video were no longer jokes. The sleepers had reached the streets. My mother came home at 5:40 p.m. She walked through the front door, set her medical bag on the hall table, looked at the 5 teenagers and 1 14-year-old assembled in her living room, and said, "Show me everything." We showed her. The photos, the maps, the radar images, the Voss article, the hospital documentation Tomas had managed to capture on his phone. She reviewed it with clinical precision, asking targeted questions. Incubation time, transmission vector, symptom progression, rate of deterioration. When she finished, she sat on the edge of the couch and pressed her palms together in front of her lips. The gray discoloration is consistent with calcium deposition in the dermal layers, she said. If this is a pathogen, it's mineralizing the tissue, turning soft tissue to stone. That's what the oral histories described, the stone sleep. It's not a metaphor. It's a symptom. Can it be treated? Naomi asked. Not with anything we have access to. If the federal response team has been monitoring this for 70 years, they may have studied samples. They may have a treatment protocol. But we're not going to wait to find out. She stood up and became, in that moment, the person I'd been trying to be for 3 days, the one with a plan. Tomas, how many exposed patients left St. Elias during the evacuation? At least 30 were moved to other facilities or sent home before the full lockdown, maybe more. Then the infection is already distributed across the town. The incubation period is 8 hours. By midnight, those 30 cases become active. By tomorrow morning, each of those could expose 10 more. 300 by dawn, Diego said quietly. At minimum. We leave now, all of us. My car and Diego's. We take Route 11 north to the interstate, and we don't stop until we're 100 miles from Ridgecrest. What about everyone else? Priya asked. My mother looked at my sister with an expression I'd never seen before. Love and grief and pragmatism fused into something terrible. We tell everyone we can on the way out. We post what we know online. But we cannot save this town tonight, sweetheart. We can only make sure someone survives to tell the truth about what happened here. We packed in 15 minutes. Essentials only. Water, food, first aid, warm clothes, chargers, documents. My mother's medical bag. Naomi's laptop with the radar images. My notebook with the tunnel maps. Diego transferred all photos and video to a cloud backup. At 6:20 p.m., we loaded the cars. My mother drove her SUV with Priya, Naomi, and Tomas. I rode with Diego and Marcus in the Civic. We pulled out of the driveway on Elkhorn Drive and turned north toward Route 11. 2 blocks from the house, we hit the first roadblock. It wasn't police. It was military. 2 Humvees parked across the intersection, soldiers in full gear, a portable barrier deployed across the road. The containment perimeter was already in place. A soldier approached Diego's window. Young, couldn't have been older than 25. His face was composed, but his eyes kept darting to something behind us. Roads closed, sir. All traffic is being redirected to the community center on Elm Street for processing. Processing, Diego said. Temporary shelter and medical screening. For your safety. We need to leave town, I said from the passenger seat. All exits are currently restricted. You'll receive further information at the community center. Behind us, my mother's SUV had stopped. I could see her through the windshield, her jaw set, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Priya was in the back seat, face pressed to the window, watching the soldiers. We were inside the perimeter. 72 hours of federal response time, and they'd moved faster than Naomi's contact predicted. The exits were closed. The quarantine was active. 12,000 people were sealed inside a town, sitting on a honeycomb of tunnels filled with things that used to be human. Diego looked at me. Community center? He asked. No, I said. Turn around. We find our own way out. He reversed the Civic. My mother followed. Behind us, the soldier watched us go, but didn't pursue. We had until midnight before the second wave. Naomi's radar images saved us. We regrouped in a grocery store parking lot on 4th Street, the last open space before the residential grid dissolved into the woods at the southern edge of town. My mother parked beside us and got out with the engine still running. They'll have every road blocked, she said. If the containment protocol is federal, they'll have satellite coverage too. We can't drive out. We don't have to drive, Naomi said. She had her laptop balanced on the hood of the SUV, the radar scans glowing on the screen. The cave system extends south-southeast, past the town boundary, into the state forest. Look, There's a cavity here, about 2 miles south, where the tunnel system opens to the surface. It's in a ravine on state land, outside the town's jurisdiction. If the perimeter is based on Ridgecrest's municipal boundary, this exit point is beyond it. You want us to go back underground, Marcus said. I want us to walk through the tunnels for 2 miles and come out on the other side of the perimeter. The tunnel's where the things are. The things are in town now. They've surfaced. The tunnels may be the emptiest they've been in centuries. It was a terrible plan. It was also the only plan. The roads were sealed, the perimeter was military grade, and in 5.5 hours, the second wave of infections would activate and the town would become unsurvivable. I know the entrance closest to us, Naomi continued. There's a storm drain access point on Willow Lane that connects to the natural cave system. I identified it on the survey data this morning. It's a tight squeeze for the first 20 feet. Then it opens into the main network. My mother looked at me. Not for permission, for assessment. She was reading my face the way she read patience, checking for signs of false confidence or hidden fear. I've been down there twice, I said. I can navigate it. Then we go, she said. Together. No one separates. We abandoned the cars. We took the bags and walked 6 blocks to Willow Lane as the sun dropped below the tree line and the shadows of Ridgecrest lengthened across the pavement. The streets were nearly empty now. Most residents had either gone to the community center or locked themselves inside their homes. In the distance, I could hear a helicopter. The military was establishing air presence. The storm drain was exactly where Naomi said it would be. A concrete pipe, 3 feet in diameter, set into the hillside behind a chain-link fence. Marcus bent the fence back. Diego went first with a flashlight. The pipe narrowed almost immediately, forcing us to crawl single file through cold water and sediment. After 20 feet, the concrete gave way to natural rock, and the passage opened. We could stand. Naomi checked her compass and pointed south-southeast. We walked in silence. My mother held Priya's hand. Thomas kept one hand on the wall, his first aid kit bumping against his hip. Marcus brought up the rear, the crowbar still in his grip, listening to the dark behind us. The tunnels down here were different from the settlement beneath the school. Cruder, less developed. Natural cave passages with minimal carving. Just the raw limestone architecture of geological time. Water dripped. Our footsteps echoed in patterns that made it impossible to tell our sounds from anything else's. 40 minutes in, we heard something ahead. Not breathing, not footsteps. A voice. Thin, distant, distorted by the acoustics of the stone. A human voice, speaking words I couldn't make out, in a cadence that was neither conversation nor singing. It rose and fell in a pattern that might have been language or might have been delirium. Diego stopped. We all stopped. That's not one of them, my mother said quietly. The infected don't vocalize like that. Then who is it? We moved forward. The tunnel curved and opened into a small natural chamber. And there, sitting against the far wall, was a woman in her 60s, wearing a University of Michigan jacket and holding a battery lantern that was almost dead. She looked up at us with exhausted recognition. "You found the tunnels," she said. "Good. I've been trying to reach someone for 3 days. My name is Helen Voss." She led us out. Dr. Voss had entered the cave system from the state forest side, following the research that had cost her career 50 years earlier. She'd come back when the seismic monitors she'd secretly maintained triggered an alert. The same alert that woke the federal machinery. But she moved faster, because she moved alone, and she knew the tunnels better than anyone alive. The exit was a narrow fissure in a limestone ravine 2.5 miles south of Ridgecrest. We emerged into cold night air and open sky. No soldiers, no perimeter. Naomi had been right. We were beyond the boundary. We walked to the nearest highway and flagged down a trucker heading east. We reached Columbus before dawn. The quarantine held for 11 days. When it lifted, Ridgecrest was empty. The official report cited a chemical spill. Nobody who lived there believed it. Nobody who didn't live there cared enough to investigate. I'm 19 now. Diego and Naomi are publishing Voss's research under their own names. Tomas works at a hospital in Pennsylvania. Marcus doesn't talk about it. Priya still holds my hand sometimes, in the dark, without explaining why. The tunnels are still there. The sleepers they didn't recover are still missing. I don't walk on bare floors anymore. I listen for cracks. Please consider subscribing. Let me know how you like the story in the comments, and stay tuned for the next video. Thank you.